The It franchise gave us one of horror's most terrifying villains, an ancient cosmic entity that feeds on fear, takes the form of a dancing clown, and haunts the town of Derry every 27 years. But here's the question that haunts every fan who's watched this franchise. If Pennywise is millions of years old with cosmic powers that can bend reality, why does it keep losing to children armed with rocks and insults? Today, we're starting with the minor mistakes that just delayed the inevitable and building all the way up to the catastrophic obsessions that literally got this cosmic horror defeated. Lengthy monologues. You're an immortal, fear-eating demon who has cornered your prey. They're terrified, vulnerable, and completely at your mercy. What's the smart play? Strike fast and feed. What does Pennywise do instead? Launches into dramatic speeches about floating and fear like he's auditioning for Broadway.
I am eternal, child.
In the 1990 miniseries, Tim Curry's Pennywise can't resist the urge to taunt and threaten instead of just finishing the job. The mechanics are simple but infuriating. Pennywise corners kids in the library, in the sewers, in their homes, and instead of using those nightmare-inducing powers to end things quickly, he pauses for theatrical effect. He's literally extending scenes with "You'll Float Too" speeches while his victims gather courage or plan escapes. The Losers Club gets multiple chances to run, regroup, and eventually figure out his weaknesses because this ancient entity can't shut up long enough to seal the deal. Mike gets chased through the library but escapes because Pennywise stops to gloat. Eddie faces him in a bathroom but survives the encounter because the clown's too busy making threats.
I got a balloon for you.
These aren't quick taunts either. We're talking full villain TED Talks while kids catch their breath. The impact is pure horror irony. The very thing that's supposed to make Pennywise terrifying, that creepy voice dripping with malice, becomes his weakness.
I am the eater of worlds and of children.
Fans turned this into memes, joking about Pennywise's need for an audience. But that's nothing compared to what comes next. Now, you might be thinking these monologues are just classic villain theatrics, bad writing, maybe? But here's where it gets weird. Pennywise has killed hundreds, maybe thousands of victims across centuries. It clearly knows how to execute fast kills when it wants to. So why the speeches with the losers specifically? Hold that question. Because the next decision makes even less sense for a predator that should be perfecting its hunting strategy. Outdated aesthetic. Pennywise's whole shtick relies on luring children with something that looks fun and inviting. Makes sense for a predator, right? Problem is, the clown decided to lock in his look sometime around the 1950s and never updated it. By the time we hit the 2017 movie set in the late 1980s, this aesthetic choice is actively working against him. Kids in the 80s aren't flocking to creepy Victorian clowns with ruffled collars. They want video games, action figures, and MTV. The decision plays out in every attempted lure. Pennywise shows up at storm drains, in basements, at carnivals, and kids are more confused than enticed. Bill Skarsgård's version doubles down on the period costume, complete with the puffy sleeves and antique face paint that would have been outdated even in Georgie's time. The clown form is supposed to draw victims in, but instead it triggers immediate stranger danger alarms. Ben sees him in the library, and his first instinct is to run. Stanley encounters him and freaks out before any supernatural horror even kicks in. The form that's meant to be camouflage becomes a flashing warning sign because Pennywise refuses to adapt to changing time. This outdated choice connects directly to Pennywise's core flaw, arrogance. An entity that's been around for millions of years can't be bothered to check what modern children actually find appealing. But those failed lures are small potatoes compared to the next blunder. 2 decisions in, and we're seeing a pattern. Pennywise seems almost deliberately inefficient with the losers, but maybe cosmic entities just don't understand human culture, right? Except that theory falls apart when you look at what comes next, because this decision proves Pennywise absolutely understands how to create effective barriers. It just chooses not to. Scary doors. In both the 2017 and 2019 films, Pennywise develops this bizarre habit of creating nightmare doors in his lair. They're supposed to be intimidating barriers that terrorize the losers, but here's the catch. They're just illusions. No real structural integrity, no actual threat, just spooky imagery that the kids can literally walk through or smash past with minimal effort. It's the supernatural equivalent of putting up a "Beware of Dog" sign when you don't own a dog. The execution is painfully obvious. When Richie and Eddie are pursuing Pennywise through the Neibolt house in Chapter 2, they encounter these doors covered in horrifying imagery. Richie's worst fears manifest on the surface. Eddie sees contamination warnings, and for about 3 seconds it seems like a real obstacle. Then they realize it's smoke and mirrors. Eddie kicks through one. Richie shoves another open. The doors that are supposed to stop or slow them down become minor inconveniences that barely break their stride. Pennywise wasted energy creating elaborate fear-based barriers that function worse than actual locked doors would have. A simple deadbolt would have been more effective than cosmic horror projections. The impact reveals Pennywise's fundamental misunderstanding of practical defense. Fear illusions work great for psychological torture, but when you need to actually stop people from reaching your vulnerable spider form, maybe invest in real walls. But if you thought wasting power on fake doors was dumb, wait until you hear about the infrastructure problems. So Pennywise can create elaborate illusions but won't make them physically solid, can terrorize through plumbing but leaves trails, builds a lair but stocks it with weapons. Starting to see the pattern? Every mistake seems to give the losers exactly what they need to fight back. Coincidence? We're only halfway through this list. The answer is coming, but first, you need to see how deep this rabbit hole goes. Messing with plumbing. Pennywise lives in the sewers beneath Derry. It's actually a smart base of operations. Dark, isolated, connected to the whole town through underground tunnels. But here's where the genius ends. This ancient entity keeps manifesting through sinks, toilets, and drains all over Derry, which means it's constantly messing with the town's plumbing system. And you know what happens when plumbing gets weird? People investigate, plumbers get called, kids notice strange sounds and follow them. Pennywise essentially leaves a trail of breadcrumbs directly to his lair. The mechanics play out across all the movies. Blood shoots out of bathroom sinks at Beverly's house. Georgie's drain encounter draws attention to storm systems. Toilets back up with sewage and supernatural phenomena in the school. Every single one of these incidents is a flashing neon sign saying "Monster in the sewers." Instead of keeping a low profile between feeding cycles, Pennywise can't resist popping up through pipes like a demonic plumber's nightmare. The 2017 film shows the losers literally following these disturbances to map out the sewer system and locate Pennywise's lair at Neibolt House. Mike tracks patterns of disappearances to water sources. Ben researches Derry's infrastructure after his own bloody sink experience. The very medium Pennywise uses for surprise attacks becomes the GPS coordinates to his home base. This decision compounds over time because it gives the losers actionable intelligence. They're not just scared kids anymore, they're investigators with a map. But that tactical error is nothing compared to the ego-driven mistake coming next: posing for pictures. Throughout Derry's history, Pennywise can't resist showing up in photographs and historical records. We're talking about appearances at town events, disasters, even formal portraits where the clown just happens to be lurking in the background. For an entity that's supposed to remain hidden between feeding cycles, this is security camera footage at the crime scene. Mike discovers old photos in the library showing Pennywise's face in crowds dating back over a century. Ben finds newspaper archives with the clown visible at the ironworks explosion and the Black Spot fire. The buildup is subtle but damning. Every historical photo is evidence that something supernatural haunts Derry. The 1990 miniseries leans into this, with Mike compiling a whole scrapbook of Pennywise sightings across different eras, complete with the same face wearing the same outfit. The 2017 film updates it for modern paranoia. Now the losers can cross-reference these images and prove this thing doesn't age. They find Pennywise at the Easter egg hunt in Old Town photos. They spot the clown at the carnival decades before they were born. Each picture is another piece of evidence that turns folklore into documented fact. The impact transforms the losers from victims into informed opponents. They're not fighting an unknown entity anymore. They have proof of its existence, its patterns, and its weaknesses. This photographic evidence directly enables the losers' research and planning for both childhood and adult confrontations. But while leaving evidence is stupid, the next choice actively arms the enemy: keeping house. The Neibolt House serves as Pennywise's hunting ground, a decrepit structure that the clown uses to lure and trap victims. Smart concept, but here's the problem. Pennywise leaves the place fully accessible with weapons and tools that can be used against him. No locks on the doors, loose boards everywhere, metal pipes just lying around, bricks, rocks, and sharp objects within easy reach. It's like a horror villain setting up an armory and putting a "please use against me" sign on it. In the 2017 film, this decision literally arms the losers during their first major confrontation. They enter Neibolt House expecting a trap and find exactly that, but they also find everything they need to fight back. Eddie grabs a fence spike. Beverly picks up a metal rod. Ben uses loose bricks as projectiles. The house that's supposed to be Pennywise's territorial advantage becomes a hardware store for improvised weapons. During the climactic rock war scene, Mike uses stones from the structure itself. Bill finds an old pipe that he swings like a bat. Every piece of decaying infrastructure becomes ammunition in the kid's hands. The aftermath is almost comedic in its irony. Pennywise gets beaten back by materials from his own lair. The losers literally use the house against its occupant, and it works well enough to drive the entity into retreat. For something that's been hunting humans for millions of years, you'd think basic environmental control would be lesson one. But if arming your enemies seems bad, the next decision actually multiplies them. Okay, stop. We need to talk about what we've covered so far because something doesn't add up. 6 decisions in, and every single one hands advantages to the losers. Pennywise monologues, giving them time to escape, uses an outdated aesthetic that warns instead of lures, creates fake barriers instead of real ones, messes with plumbing, leaving trails, poses for historical photos, providing evidence, stalks its lair with improvised weapons. Here's what every horror fan assumes: Pennywise is just arrogant, an ancient evil too proud to adapt. But what if that's wrong? What if there's something else driving these choices? Something the franchise has been hiding in plain sight? Because the next decision introduces a new element. Pennywise doesn't just make tactical errors, it actively creates more enemies when it could avoid them. Why would a predator multiply its threats? Keep that question burning, because the last 3 decisions are where everything clicks clicks into place. Victimizing peers. Pennywise doesn't just hunt the Losers Club directly, it also possesses and influences other kids in Derry, particularly the Bowers gang. Henry Bowers becomes a weapon, Belch and Victor become enforcers, and Patrick Hockstetter gets warped into something even darker. The logic seems sound at first. Turn the bullies into additional threats, divide the losers' attention, create multiple fronts of attack. Except here's what actually happens. Every kid Pennywise touches becomes evidence of supernatural activity, and eventually either dies or goes insane, drawing more attention to Derry's problems. The cycle escalates throughout the franchise. Henry starts seeing visions and hearing voices, which leads him to escalate from schoolyard bully to attempted murderer. This draws police attention. Patrick gets lured into the sewers and killed, which triggers searches and investigations. By the time we hit Chapter 2, Henry's been institutionalized for decades, another witness to supernatural phenomena that validates the loser's memories. Pennywise thinks it's creating chaos, but it's actually leaving a trail of corrupted victims who can testify to its existence. The entity influenced historical figures too, creating patterns researchers like Mike can trace across generations. This decision backfires by perpetuating the very cycle that brings the losers back. Each corrupted kid becomes a cautionary tale, each influenced adult becomes part of the evidence chain. The strategy of spreading fear through proxies just spreads awareness instead. Now we're entering dangerous territory. The decisions so far were bad tactics, but what comes next? These are personal choices that transform hunting into obsession. Pennywise stops being a predator and becomes something else entirely. Watch closely because these final 3 mistakes reveal what the entity actually wants. And it's not just food. Taking Audra. In the 1990 miniseries, Pennywise decides to kidnap Bill's wife Audra as bait for the adult losers. The logic is classic villain hostage-taking. Leverage a loved one to draw out the hero and make him emotional and reckless. But here's the fatal miscalculation. Taking Audra doesn't make Bill weaker. It makes him absolutely furious and completely committed to destroying Pennywise no matter the cost. You don't threaten a man's wife and expect him to be less dangerous. The execution unfolds with Pennywise exposing Audra to the deadlights, leaving her catatonic and floating in the sewer lair. It's meant to be horrifying, and it is, but it also removes any lingering doubt Bill has about finishing this fight. Before Audra's capture, there's a part of Bill that wants to run, to leave Derry and forget the nightmare. After, he's charging into the spider's lair with zero self-preservation instinct. The other losers rally around his raid. What was supposed to be intimidation becomes motivation. Pennywise takes a woman who had no role in the original conflict and makes her suffering the emotional core of Bill's vendetta. The aftermath is poetic justice. Bill defeats Pennywise, rescues Audra, and though she remains catatonic initially, his love and determination eventually bring her back. The hostage situation that was meant to weaken the hero instead gave him unshakable resolve. It's Villain Playbook 101. Don't give the hero a personal stake unless you want maximum effort coming your way. But if targeting loved ones is counterproductive, the next pattern is straight up self-sabotage. Taking hostages, letting victims walk away, getting personal with hunts. See the escalation? Every decision prioritizes prolonging conflict over efficient killing. It's almost like Pennywise wants the fight to continue, needs it to. But why would an entity that feeds on fear choose the hardest possible feeding strategy? The answer lies in understanding what Pennywise truly hunts. And that brings us to the second to last decision, the one that defines every encounter in the franchise, letting them walk away. This is the recurring theme that defines Pennywise's relationship with the losers across every adaptation. Multiple times throughout their childhoods, Pennywise has clean shots at killing members of the group and just doesn't take them. He corners Eddie in a bathroom and lets him escape. He traps Stan in the sewers but allows him to flee. He isolates Ben multiple times and settles for terrorizing instead of killing. The entity extends these encounters for fear-feeding purposes, playing with its food until the food learns to fight back. The pattern is most obvious in slow-burn confrontations. Pennywise appears to Mike in the library and chases him but never catches him, despite supernatural speed. Beverly faces him alone in her bathroom and survives because he prioritizes the scare over the kill. These repeated encounters become survival training for the losers. Each escape teaches them Pennywise's patterns, builds their courage, and proves the entity can be resisted. By the time they're adults returning to Derry, they have decades of near-death experience that most victims never get. They learn to conquer fear as children because Pennywise kept giving them graduation tests instead of final exams. The impact cascades across the entire franchise. Every childhood survivor becomes an adult threat. Every escape builds confidence. Every taunt and release moment proves that fear can be overcome. Pennywise essentially trains its own worst enemies by refusing to commit to quick kills. The losers shouldn't have lived past their first encounters, but they walked away stronger each time. But while letting individuals escape is bad strategy, the next choice reveals active stupidity. So Pennywise trains its enemies through repeated encounters, letting them build confidence and learn its patterns. That's not predation, that's something else. But before we get to the ultimate decision, we need to understand what happens when Pennywise stops hunting and starts playing. Because the next choice reveals the entity isn't trying to eat efficiently. It's trying to create something specific, getting personal. Somewhere along the way, Pennywise stops being an efficient predator and starts playing favorites. Instead of taking easy victims across Derry, the clown develops custom hunts for each loser based on their specific fears. Bill sees dead Georgie. Eddie faces contamination contamination and disease. Beverly deals with blood and abuse. Stanley confronts religious horror. Mike sees racial violence. Ben battles body horror. Richie faces his deepest secret. These personalized nightmares require research, planning, and energy that could be spent just eating random kids. The mechanics of this decision showcase its inefficiency. Pennywise has to study each loser, understand their psychology, craft specific illusions, and execute elaborate scenarios. The 2019 film dedicates entire sequences to these customized hunts. Beverly in her childhood apartment, Eddie at the pharmacy, Richie at the arcade. Each one is a production number when a simple ambush would work better. The entity burns through power, creating tailored horror experiences instead of using that energy to just kill them. It's the supernatural equivalent of overthinking a task until you miss the deadline. This personalization backfires catastrophically because it teaches the losers that Pennywise's power comes from their own minds. Once they realize the fears are projections they can control, the nightmares lose potency. Beverly breaks her blood hallucination. Eddie faces down the leper. Richie confronts his coded fears. Each personalized attack becomes a therapy session that makes them stronger. Pennywise is running fear seminars for the people who'll destroy it, but if wasting energy on custom nightmares is counterproductive, the next choice is actively self-destructive. Personalized hunts that teach victims their fears are conquerable. Custom nightmares that function as therapy sessions. Beginning to see it now? Every decision on this list has been building to the same endpoint, creating stronger opponents. But why? What does an ancient cosmic entity gain from forging its own worst enemies? The final decision answers everything, and it reframes every escape, every confrontation in the entire franchise. Prey selection. Pennywise's first kill in the 2017 film is Georgie Denbrough, and from a predator's perspective, it's actually perfect. A young child alone in the rain, no witnesses, quick and brutal. Except Pennywise picks the younger brother of Bill, who happens to be a smart, determined kid who'll grow up to be a writer obsessed with solving mysteries. By killing Georgie, Pennywise doesn't just feed, it creates its nemesis. Bill's entire character arc is driven by guilt and vengeance for his brother. Every decision Bill makes leads back to avenging Georgie. The kill itself is iconic. The paper boat, the storm drain conversation, the arm rip, Georgie bleeding out in the rain. It's brutal and effective as a murder, but catastrophic as target selection. This isn't some random kid who'll be forgotten after the 27-year cycle ends. This is the foundational trauma that forges the leader of the Losers Club. Bill's guilt motivates him to research Derry's history. His anger drives him to confront Pennywise in childhood. His unfinished business brings him back as an adult with decades of obsession sharpening his resolve. One dead 6-year-old creates one relentless 30-something warrior. The decision compounds across the franchise because Georgie's death isn't just Bill's motivation. It becomes the losers' rallying cry. They all remember what happened to Bill's brother. Beverly sees it as proof that Pennywise must be stopped. Ben uses it to fuel his research. Mike includes it in his historical documentation. Eddie's fear is partly rooted in watching his friend break down over sibling loss. Stan's decision to die as an adult connects to childhood trauma that started with Georgie's murder. Richie's loyalty to Bill is cemented by witnessing his friend's devastation. One kill created 6 lifelong enemies and one suicide that would haunt the survivors. But if creating your nemesis is bad, the next decision is full-blown obsession. But here's what fans miss when they mock Pennywise for these choices. What if the entity doesn't feed on fear alone? What if it needs something more than terror? Think about it. Pennywise awakens every 27 years to feed, but it specifically creates long-term opponents who return as adults. It could feast on hundreds of random victims per cycle and stay hidden. Instead, it crafts multi-decade conflicts with the same people. The franchise hints at this in The Ritual of Chud. Pennywise gains power from belief and attention, not just fear, but obsession. The losers spend their entire lives thinking about Pennywise, dreaming about it, being shaped by it. That's not accidental prey creation. That's cultivating a specific crop. Maybe every decision on this list wasn't a mistake. Maybe they were investments. Think back through everything we covered. The monologues keep victims engaged instead of dead. The outdated aesthetic creates memorable trauma instead of forgettable deaths. The scary doors and sewer trails turn victims into investigators, deepening their connection to Pennywise. Historical photos embed the entity into human consciousness across generations. Weaponized lairs make confrontations interactive. Corrupted peers spread stories and fear beyond direct victims. Hostages create emotional stakes that last lifetimes. Personalized hunts ensure maximum psychological impact and obsession. Killing Georgie creates Bill. Tormenting the losers creates a unified force. Every decision manufactures nemesis after nemesis. And that brings us to the decision that encompasses all the others. The obsession that defines Pennywise's entire existence in Derry. This is where we finally answer the question we asked at the start. Why does an immortal cosmic entity keep losing to humans? Because maybe losing was always part of the plan, fixating on the losers. Here's the big one, the decision that defines Pennywise's downfall across every adaptation. This ancient cosmic entity becomes absolutely obsessed with 7 specific humans, not just hunting them as part of normal feeding, but fixating on them to the exclusion of easier prey, more efficient feeding patterns, and basic self-preservation. Pennywise could feast on hundreds of Derry children over the 27-year cycles. Instead, it keeps circling back to the losers, escalating from opportunistic predation predation to personal vendetta, and ultimately setting up both its childhood defeat and adult destruction. The obsession starts in childhood when the losers first fight back. Instead of backing off and picking softer targets, Pennywise doubles down. It invests enormous energy in personalized hunts, elaborate traps, and psychological warfare specifically designed for this one group. By the time they're adults, Pennywise is so focused on finishing what it started that it pulls them all back to Derry for a rematch. Think about that strategic choice. This entity draws its only successful opponents back for round 2, instead of just letting them stay forgotten and traumatized in other cities. It literally resurrects the threat against itself because it can't let go. The 2019 film makes this crystal clear during the Ritual of Chud. Pennywise has multiple chances to kill individual losers during their token hunts. Bill is alone and vulnerable searching for Georgie's bike. Beverly is isolated at her old apartment. Eddie faces the leper with no backup. Each one is a guaranteed kill if Pennywise commits. But it doesn't. It keeps toying with them, extending the game, building to some grand confrontation where it defeats all of them together. The entity wants the satisfaction of crushing the group that defied it, and that ego costs everything. When they unite for the final battle, their combined belief is strong enough to shrink Pennywise down to a killable form. The cascade effect is total. The obsession turns cyclical feeding into existential conflict. It transforms 7 scared kids into battle-hardened adults who spend decades preparing for the rematch. Stan's suicide, traumatic as it is, strengthens the remaining losers' resolve. Each personal hunt gives them intel on Pennywise's weaknesses. Each survival builds their confidence. By the final confrontation, they've studied this entity for years, know its patterns, understand its vulnerabilities, and most critically, they've learned that belief and unity can overpower cosmic horror. They literally defeat Pennywise by bullying it, shrinking it down through mockery and collective willpower, then crushing its heart. An ancient evil older than humanity dies because it got obsessed with revenge against a group of middle-aged people who remembered it. Pennywise's fixation is what allows the losers to win in childhood, escape to adulthood, and return strong enough to finish the job. It's the core narrative engine. If Pennywise had just moved on to easier prey, none of the hero's victories would have been possible. The entity's arrogance, its inability to accept defeat, its need to personally destroy the ones who got away, all of it stems from this catastrophic obsession. Every other dumb decision on this list feeds into this one. The monologues, the personalized hunts, the hostage-taking, the elaborate traps, letting them walk away. All of it is just different flavors of the same fatal flaw. Pennywise cares more about terrorizing these specific humans than efficiently feeding and surviving. And that's what makes it perfect horror storytelling. The monster's greatest strength, its ability to inspire fear, becomes its greatest weakness when it fixates on victims who learn to fight back. The cosmic entity with infinite power loses to human determination and friendship because it couldn't resist the urge to prove its dominance. It's the ultimate cautionary tale about arrogance, dressed up in clown makeup and surrounded by floating corpses. If you enjoyed this video and want to see the evolution of Pennywise, click the video on the screen.